raise a spoon to Grandma, who always took all the hungry cousins to McDonald's for McNuggets and the Play Slide. Have something sweet in her honor. Come to McDonald's and treat yourself to the Grandma McFlurry today. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. At participating McDonald's for a limited time.
Welcome to Pennsylvania in Focus. I'm Eliana Kernodle, standing in for Kristen Smith today. House legislators grilled leaders of the Pennsylvania Game Commission over the independent agency's internal processes, stewardship of its assets, and whether improvements have been made since an audit revealed a litany of issues in 2019. Joining me to tell us more about this is Pennsylvania reporter Anthony Hennon. Anthony, what concerns did they raise in this hearing?
Yeah, so this has been something that's been simmering for a while. Back in 2019, the Pennsylvania auditor issued a report flagging almost 3 or 4 dozen different things going on. A lot of this was concentrated on things like oversight of the commission's oil and gas revenues and how accurate those have been in tracking. There were a number of things going on here. And so that's been a bit of a background issue for a few years now. The hearing on Monday was actually the first one called specifically to address some of these things. But this has been much more of an issue in recent months since former Executive Director Bryan Burhans resigned back in, I believe that was May. Yes, he resigned in May. And then the commission hastily appointed Steve Smith, who some people was worried that this was not a legal way that they did it. Then they sort of hurried up and had a formal meeting to appoint him. We also saw back in February, the Game Commission was taking a shellacking for hiring a lobbyist at a cost of $10,000 per month. And this is something that no state agency had done since 2007. So there's been a number of things boiling up here. And this was the first meeting where legislators could really dig into some of these problems, and they didn't really hold back, Democrat or Republican for that matter. Representative Joe Hohenstein, who's a Democrat in Philadelphia, sort of led off the questioning, who said, I've been disturbed by the internal processes that have gotten us to this point. I'll tell you that in my 3+ years on this committee, the Game Commission hasn't impressed me with its internal procedures or how they communicate with us. They need to do better. Representative David Maloney, who's the Republican minority chair on the House committee, has been a very vocal critic of how the Game Commission has conducted itself. He's flagged concerns that they're not as responsive to sportsmen, and really he's calling for a reckoning of the commission. Previously, he's made arguments that the commission really needs to appoint someone from the ranks of hunters themselves rather than the way they do things now. He sort of summed this up as a great agency that I think has got off the tracks. He argued, if you can't be transparent, then this meeting is worthless. It's about time we have a light shined on an agency that should be providing for the sportsmen. And so Steve Smith, the new executive director, has really pledged to change things. He said there needs to be more transparency and there needs to be more communication. I'm completely committed to that. I've asked the committee chairs to hold me accountable. We want to repair that relationship between the commission and the legislature. But I think that seems to be easier said than done, and the way that a lot of these questions were asked and what legislators were emphasizing really brings out that this is going to be a long road. There's no quick fix here to get the Game Commission and the legislature on a more, how should I say, productive or a cooperative, foundation, footpath, whatever you want to call it here.
One of the specific things they kind of got into it over was connected to royalties and paper checks. What was the controversy there?
Yeah, this seemed to be symbolic of the problems here with the Game Commission. One thing that really stood out was that, the commission's getting a lot of money now coming in from leases on natural gas, especially. It brought in almost $80 million last year. The commission was not expecting it to be that low, actually. They're expecting it to be closer to $130 million. But they blame this on lower natural gas prices than they expected. But royalty checks are not direct deposited to the commission. Instead, these checks are sent in as physical paper checks. And that sort of irked people. Representative Jim Haddock, who's a Democrat out of Hughstown, pointed out, you're still using physical checks that cause a delay. It's possible checks get lost in the mail or not deposited in a timely fashion. And the Game Commission argued that our stance is we prefer the paper copy for accounting purposes. which David Gustafson, the director of the Bureau of Wildlife Habitat Management, said. He argued, we're able to ensure we have backup documentation for our own internal accounting practices when we use those paper checks. To which Haddock responded, so you're not good with technology. And so this is sort of a longstanding problem here of, other agencies do not necessarily do this through physical paper checks. A number of legislators encourage the commission to look toward, the Fish and Boat Commission of how they respond to complaints, or look at the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources for how they deal with royalty checks and, leasing out lands. But it seems like the Game Commission, they're talking more about transparency and better communication. But for some of these processes, they're not always willing to embrace what critics are saying.
Well, Anthony, thank you for your insights on this story. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com.
How do you keep your edge? With the cutting-edge design of the stylish Lexus RX, it's second nature. Powertrain options offer power on demand. An available cloud-based Lexus interface keeps you tapped in with ease.
Hey, Lexus, show me the way home.
So never lose your edge with the Lexus RX. Experience amazing at your Lexus dealer.
Drive Connect capability with cloud navigation, including Google Points of Interest data and intelligent assistant, including Hey Lexus and Destination Assist subscription required.